Let's go!
Marvel vs. Capcom from the year 2000. The year 2000 interview, originally printed in the March 2000 issue of Arcadia magazine. This interview with director Tatsuya Nakai and producer Yoshiri Sudo covers the making of MVC2, the final 2D iteration of Capcom's beloved series of crossover fighting games, whose over-the-top hyper game systems, tag team mechanics, and detailed renditions of popular and obscure Marvel and Capcom characters bore heavy influence on fighting games and comic book illustrators alike. You're taking a huge step with releasing a Dreamcast and NAOMI version at the same time. What was the goal behind the simultaneous launch? The convention until now has been to stagger the release dates of arcade and home versions, but this time around we wanted to deploy them in a way that make them easy to concurrently play and get people excited about both versions. Specifically, we made it possible to play the arcade version with the Dreamcast controller, and we put a lot of care into designing the controls so that they wouldn't feel off-putting whether played on a Dreamcast or an arcade. Pretty much game designed for the fucking Dreamcast, right? We wanted people to be able to play without discomfort, and that gave us a lot of trouble. What difficulties did you face in terms of the VMU integration? Initially, the plan was to release the Dreamcast and NAOMI version simultaneously with almost the same content, but our concern was that people might pick up the Dreamcast version and may never venture any further. As we were thinking about what kinds of differentiating features to include for each version, we decided to focus around the VMU. Our ideas around the VMU were centered around the theme of evolution, with the thinking of that being to link and evolve from the Dreamcast to NAOMI and vice versa. The VMU would have obviously appeal. What other ideas did you come up with before you settled on the game as it is now? So normally the scale of the game project is gradually reduced from the initial plans, but this time we were able to pull off way more than we expected, and the project actually ended up being bigger than we initially planned it to be. There are almost no ideas that we were not able to implement, and in that respect, there was an extremely fulfilling project. I'm proud that we were able to produce something with such a high level of completeness. The game features new characters, Sun, Domingo, Ruby Heart. Can you tell us how these three characters came to be? Until now, Noromaru has been the only original Versus series character, so I wanted to add new characters to the game from the beginning. While I asked Iguchi, the character design lead, for designs, he told me he wanted to revive someone from a classic game and sent me a design that reinterpreted San as a girl. It was interesting and had a lot of impact, so it was adopted. By the way, relevant, we're about to play Wukong. Is San not the daughter of Wukong? Is that where that story goes? It isn't just a gender flip Wukong, right? It's the granddaughter. Yes. As for Amingo, we noticed that the Capcom side didn't have any non-human characters capable of really crazy movement. So he was designed in order to fulfill that role. Amingo? What? I guess his big plant super is one thing. Ruby Heart is a character that was produced when we put out the call for original characters that can play a marquee role, similar to Ryu and Cyclops. In that case, is Ruby the lead character? That's right, there aren't many games with a cool female character like this taking center stage. So this is a new challenge for us. Cable and Mara are new additions on the Marvel side. How were they selected? One of the staffers at our company is extremely well versed in American comics, so we asked him to come up with all these candidates, using the selection criteria of attacks that can be easily understood at a glance, and it doesn't significantly overlap with any of the other characters introduced on the previous games, as well as cool factor. We narrowed the selection down to those two. Cable in particular, we factored in his slightly convoluted backstory as Cyclops' son from the future as something that players would find fun. Why did you include two Wolverines? At first we wanted to focus on the adamantium-less Bone Claw Wolverine, but the directive from Marvel was that we had to include both versions. It was Marvel's call. They wanted Bone-Verine, but Marvel is like, you need both. And they're like, Wolverine was such bullshit. He was so popular that Marvel is like, hey, we have the opportunity to put two of them in there? Do it. Two Wolverines? Do it. Was it tough to differentiate them? Yes. The two characters look almost identical, so we had to really think about what we'd have to do to pronounce the differences. There are a lot of subtle changes. I really hope people can play both characters and spot the differences. The gameplay system has changed from a 6-button game to a 4-button game. When this project started at the end of last year, the Dreamcast port of the original Marvel vs. Capcom had just been released, and when I went to play it, I realized it was tough to play on a controller, and that's when I came up with the idea of leaning into controller-style inputs. I figured that if I could unify the play feel, then home players would have an easier time playing in arcades. Another reason was that the 6-button setup, there are a lot of commands, and they use simultaneous button presses, which aren't specifically intuitive. By reducing the attack buttons to 4 and adding dedicated power buttons or partner buttons, we were able to to be more intuitively give players the feel of controlling 3 characters. Initially, there were a lot of naysayers within the company, but the results from the location tests and other demo events convinced us that people would be comfortable with the new system. Are there drawbacks to the loss of medium attacks? Man, oh man, there was. Because the initial impression of MVC2, the first month it was out, was that this is a baby game made for babies and big boys play Marvel versus Capcom. MVC1's the big boy game, and this MVC2 game is a baby game. You cannot handle 6 inputs. It's too many buttons for you, you stupid baby. We designed the game in such a way that it's fun without them. So I hope people can enjoy this new system. Please tell us about the many new games. Yeah, it seems like they got a lot of flack on this shit. Tell us about the many new game systems that have been added. From the moment we started planning this game, I'd been thinking about a 3v3 tag system as a big selling point. And from there, we came up with the idea for delayed hyper combos, which allows players to string together hyper moves by all 3 player characters. General producer Funemazu was also interested in this idea, so we were able to dedicate or decide on that pretty quickly. Assist type selection is another idea that existed from the beginning. Initially, it was personality based. A bullish Ryu would throw a fiery Hadouken, whereas a cold-hearted Ryu would throw an icy Hadouken, for example. And from there, after a lot of trial and error, coming up with something that'd be easy and intuitive to understand, we came up with the system as you see now. It's not intuitive. It was not intuitive. Alpha, beta, omega, or some shit like that? What the fuck are they called? Alpha, beta, gamma. Yeah. There's like 3 names per assist, and they have descriptors, but the descriptor of it doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, it doesn't... What is the alpha moves on characters? Are they universally this? No. They aren't always the same thing. And it's like A type, B type, C type. So still, it was expansion type. Exactly. Expansion type. What the fuck are we talking about here? Snapback was something they came up with during the latter half of development as the game system was in process of being solidified. When you have 3 characters on each team, players tend to swap out characters when their life is low, which leads to a lot of games ending by time over. So we started to wonder if there was a way we could add something that let players yoink their opponent's character off the bench. And that's what we came up with. Accordingly, it added another layer of strategy and made players gamble on whether to defeat the character in front of them at the moment or go to the player on standby. I think it led to a lot more interesting games. It did. Snapback is so fucking smart, dude. The entire game changes when all of a sudden you literally yoink in their assist character. Force you to play as your assist character now. Like, now you're gonna get mauled because your assist character isn't nearly as powerful as your main characters, you know? And then it forces the situation of causing a raw tag or having to use meter to get the character back in, you know, via DHC. It's such a smart mechanic, dude. The efficacy of THCs varies wildly from character to character. DHCs being the preferred option for the majority of higher tier characters. But certain characters like Juggernaut and BB Hood have atypically powerful DHCs that when slotted into the right team can be proved obscenely powerful. The assist snipe team. And that's without Juggernaut glitch, right, chat? This is a non-Juggernaut glitch. What's the difference between delayed hyper combos and total hyper combos, THC known as variable combinations? I don't know what the fuck they're talking about here. DHCs offer a lot of options, but also a lot of depth. There are a lot of elements to take into consideration, like the precise manner of connecting each move and the order of each character. THC are something that have been around for a while as an easy to grasp, easy to execute way of giving everyone team hyper combo. Duh. Give everyone a big flashy attack. Assists at the same time. That's it. As for the game, we changed the input so that it's formed by pressing 2 buttons simultaneously. In the old games, it was like fireball forward, heavy punch, heavy kick, without the need for a directional command. We made it very easy for players to perform these big, crazy attacks, and we hope they serve as a gateway for players to assemble their own DHC. Yeah, this is a THC because all 3 characters come on screen at one time, and they all use 1-bar supers. Watch. Juggernaut, all 3 characters at one time. In MVC2, if you want to do this, it's just assist 1 and assist 2 at the same time. Dude, if you have a good THC team, you can literally murder assists. It's a kill button. Assist is out there, they're fucking dead. You literally roll them over, but it's expensive. It costs like, 3/5 your bar if you have full bar. Did you focus on DHCs being the optimal choice for max damage? The advantage of DHCs is that they allow for players to maximize the amount of damage through their own ingenuity, whereas THCs are intended to deal a consistent amount of damage. Not true. Definitely some THCs are much better than others. significantly better than others. Some THCs are pretty fucking crazy in the game. I feel like there are specific hyper combinations that don't combo. There are some that don't connect in sequence, but in those cases, you can change the order, their utilities different on block and so on, so I think players will be able to see new applications to match those circumstances. DHCs can also be good or bad depending on how they're deployed. Some scale better at the start, and at the end, you know. Which direction were you aiming for with regards to game balance? Oh, wow. First off, the reduction of attack buttons from 6 to 4 might give one the immediate impression that their characters will have fewer tools. So we made sure the characters could still do almost everything they were able to do with 6. Specifically, we made it that one of the chaining routes, which use 6 buttons, can be recreated with 4 buttons by pressing certain buttons multiple times, which is goddamn brilliant. You made the game have literally 2 less attacks per character, and somehow all the combos are still the same. By pressing light, it gives you light medium. That is so fucking smart, dude. that is some mega brain shit. That is like, when I noticed that was one of those like, wow. Even as like a young teenager, I was like, that's really smart. And for specials with the medium attack, the option was particularly important. We moved that functionality to either the weak or the strong button. We've also reduced the number of Ukemi options, which lessens the advantageous nature of wake-up attacks, restricted the number of assists per combo to 1 in order to prevent infinites, and made a lot less conspicuous tweaks like reviewing the overall damage and putting more limits on air dashes. And we think it's shaped up quite well. Well, that all got broke, but you know, the intentions were good. In hindsight, is there anything you wish you could change? Nope. That tells you how much work went into it. This is the first 2D fighting game for the NAOMI platform. How do you feel about making 2D fighting games for NAOMI? The increase in storage capacity is a big deal. The sheer size of the game's roster is a fairly direct indicator of how big a factor that is. Beyond that, it's because it's 3D hardware, it allowed us to combine approaches and how to achieve new methods of visual expression. Even if a game system or characters is rendered in 2D, you can make it look fresh. And I think that it can allow for a variety of different visual styles in accordance with the ideas of individual creators. This many characters in a fighting game was almost impossible. 50 plus characters in a fighting game? The arcade boards didn't have enough memory, dude. Once we got to disc-based memory in the late 90s with NAOMI and shit, with the Dreamcast board essentially, we finally had the ability to do it. Like the game size was reaching a gigabyte. And to be real, some of these games were getting very big, right? Before modern day compression was a thing, it was getting very big. With this game, the characters are explicitly rendered in 2D and the backgrounds in 3D, which makes the characters easier to see. At the beginning, a lot of people say the characters don't mesh with the backgrounds, and this just feels weird. But on the flip side, I feel that it made the characters easier to track and directly contributed to the playability of the game. They're kind of right. The backgrounds are kind of jarring, that the characters don't feel like they're in the same universe as the backgrounds. But considering the visual speed of the game and how many different elements are combined at any given time, there's a reason why MVC2 has almost no characters in any background. There's actually like no characters walking around or shit in any background at all. That is specifically for a design reason, because they have 6 player characters on a screen at any given time. And they don't want to confuse any background characters for like foreground characters. Again, these are more considerations being put in that like readability is a problem now. And we have to have our foreground feel much different than our background. An issue also present in the game we're making right now with Marvel Infinite and beyond. MVC2's mix of 2D and 3D backgrounds are not inherently disliked by players, but in general, incongruity of the stage designs were compared to both the Marvel vs. Capcom rosters remains contentious. Even with the Carnival stage being perhaps the most notorious, the image is taken from the HD port, which remains a 14:3, 4:3 boundaries, playfield to 16:9. The songs are unlike anything else. This time around, the songs were pieced together from the existing materials rather than using artists. What? The theme of the project, I want to do something new, also extended to the music, and we were including sung vocals. I told the sound team I wanted an overall cool sound and more or less left it to them. And I think the tunes they came up with are quite hip. A lot of people have said that the more traditional game-like music would have been better, but I think reactions like those prove that we made the right call. He says I want a cool sound, and these motherfuckers gave them jazz. Might be the originator of the term cool, came from jazz. Good on you, sound team. Who are the composers? What do we know them for? Tetsuya Shibata, who was in charge of Power Stone, who was also in charge of music for Power Stone 2, which featured an orchestral sound that was unusual for fighting games. Yes, Power Stone's soundtrack is not normal. It's like, what the hell is this, dude? It's like a weird space opera type of thing. What the fuck are we listening to? He was able to come up with something unique for this game as well. I think it turned out great. Please tell us how you're able to realize support for matching service. Whoa. On online play on the Dreamcast, chat. In the beginning, Funamazu asked us to be possible to add online battles as a major selling point. And after discussing it internally and determining if it might be feasible, we decided to approach KDDI with the idea. Thankfully, KDDI was on board and got to work on making it a reality. We didn't have a ton of time for development, but thanks to the hard work, KDDI, we were able to make it happen. At first, I was worried about lag during online matches, but when we ran into house tests, the lag didn't feel as bad as I feared it would. We were able to comfortably play online, so we rushed to finish the game. People who've never tried it tend to think online play, I don't know, and shy away from it, but those people are the ones who are the most impressed when they finally try it themselves. So I really urge you to go hands-on for yourself. Yeah, they worked with a phone company. Yeah, KDDI is like a phone company in Japan, right? The line charge is 13 yen a minute. So when it comes out to 50 or 60 yen per game, would you like to comment on that expense? Certainly won't be increasing. I know some people are saying that 13 yen a minute rate is too high as it is, but the lowest price possible right now. My hope is that the price would be able to come down as more people play the game. Chat. Do we remember when making phone calls per minute used to cost money and going online per minute used to actually cost money? Wrapping up, please offer a big parting comment for the users. The NAOMI version is interesting in and of itself, but the full experience encompasses online battles and so much more. I'd like for people to enjoy it in its totality and not just for one particular element. Try taking your controller to the arcade. Give online battles a shot. The dudes that made Marvel vs. Capcom. Read chat a bedtime story. Motherfucker, I've been streaming for 3 hours. I've been reading you a bedtime story for 3 hours. 3 hour bedtime story? Go to bed.